I'm going to say something that might go against what you've been told about learning jazz. Stop trying to learn everything and stop trying to sound like everyone. It's not that the greats aren't worth studying, they absolutely are. But the problem is most jazz students are so busy chasing every style, every player, and maybe even every era of jazz that they never actually develop a voice of their own. So today, I want to show you a different way of thinking about this whole situation. So here's what happens to most students. You discover the music and then you are blown away. So then you start listening. So you might listen to maybe Miles Davis, Bill Evans, and then Oscar Peterson, Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, maybe Thelonious Monk, McCoy Tyner. And the more you listen, the more you realize how much there actually is. So the next thing is you start trying to learn all of it. Maybe in 1 week you're learning bebop, and then the next thing is now you're learning modal jazz, and then next, who knows, you're probably trying some free jazz, so you're transcribing a Charlie Parker solo because you've heard that bebop is the secret to learning jazz, if you can learn this. But while you're doing that, you're probably watching tutorials on McCoy Tyner as well, so you're like, ooh, McCoy Tyner voicings. And then while you're doing that, you're probably also trying to figure out what Thelonious Monk was trying to do rhythmically, and then before you know it, years go by and you've probably accumulated a huge amount of knowledge. And the unfortunate thing is when you sit down to actually play, it sounds like nothing really, Maybe we'll hear a little bit of this, maybe a little bit of that, but we can't really hear your voice or your own ideas coming across on your instrument. Unfortunately, that's a trap that almost every serious jazz student falls into at some point. Now, here's what's interesting. When you look at the players that we consider to be great, the ones with an immediately recognizable voice, almost none of them were trying to do everything. They each found something that mattered to them quite deeply, and then what they did is they went all the way into that thing. So if you take someone like Thelonious Monk, for instance, harmonically, he probably wasn't trying to play, beautiful impressionist voicings like Bill Evans. He wasn't trying to play as fast as Art Tatum, but what made Monk was actually his rhythm. So he could take one of his songs, and that's another thing actually. He said, what, instead of playing other people's songs, let me just focus on playing my own songs. So he could take maybe a song of his like Blue Monk, for instance. So his playing was really about all those spaces and just the refusal to maybe play everything on the beat. That rhythmic stubbornness and that rhythmic experimentation. That was his thing, and he committed to that thing completely. Dave Brubeck was obsessed with time signatures. So while everyone else was playing in 4/4, Dave was exploring 5/4 or playing in 7 or playing in 9. He had this record where he's playing things like so experimenting with times like that, or even and hearing songs with these time signatures, it might feel a little unusual at first. But that was Dave's thing. And you know what I find interesting? This one album, I think it's called Time Out, which was a bestseller at the time. It sold so many records. He didn't even play a solo on that entire record, and yet that became one of the most popular jazz records of all time. So he just did his thing, you know. And time signatures, I guess, fascinated him rather than just trying to master every single style. You know, he wasn't even trying to play bebop. And then Simon Monk, who was doing his thing with rhythm, Dave is doing his thing with times. Art Tatum, maybe on the other hand, his thing was probably just pure virtuosity. So he was playing all those notes, and even harmonically is doing things that were probably unheard of at the time, you know. So it's very harmonically rich, almost taking like an orchestral type approach to playing the piano. I won't even begin to attempt to play what Art Tatum was playing, but he basically could do everything. He could stride, he would play tense, he could do all sorts of things. But the bottom line is, these three people had three completely different approaches, and each of them had their own unmistakable voice, and none of them really got to where they were by trying to do everything. They just found their thing, and then they focused on that thing. So what does that actually mean practically, you know, for you and I? I think it means that at some point in your development or on your journey, you probably now need to stop asking the question, ooh, what should I now learn next? And what we really need to start asking is, what do I actually care about? Not, oh, what's going to impress people? Or, ooh, what's going to get the most likes, you know, if I post this on social media? What genuinely moves you when you hear it? Maybe it's the way certain pianist maybe uses their space, you know. So maybe you listen to Ahmad Jamal and you're listening to the silence between the notes, and that really moves you. Or maybe it's the harmony. So maybe you just love the way this pianist plays his chords, you know. It might be Bill Evans. And you just love maybe his voicings, maybe you like the inner voicings, and that's what you're drawn to. Maybe it's rhythm, you know. Maybe you like the feeling of maybe playing behind the beat, you know, like Errol Garner, you know, or maybe the person just plays these unusual accents, you know, like Monk. So whatever it is, what's that thing for you? Because that's really your thread. That's the thing that's worth going deeper into. So this doesn't mean that you're going to stop learning from other players. You absolutely must keep on listening. You must keep on transcribing. You must keep on absorbing. But then at some point you have to now start filtering everything through your own focus. You know, so you want to see music through your own musical lens, which is basically your ears, but in reality it's actually your heart. So what are you feeling on the inside of you? So you don't just want to be collecting influences anymore. You want to now start developing your own perspective about music in general. So now this is actually the foundation of how I teach jazz. So it's something known as the target approach. I first heard about this from Bill Evans. And maybe he didn't call it the target approach. Target approach is probably something I read in a book at some point in my life. I'm guessing maybe the Hal Crook book on jazz improvisation. I think that's probably where I heard the phrase target approach for the first time. Brilliant book, by the way, so you probably need to check that out. But the bottom line is, instead of trying to focus or trying to work on everything simultaneously, instead you identify one musical focus at a time, so one target, and then everything in your practice, in every practice session, you know, for at least a period of time, sometimes a week, sometimes a month, sometimes several months. So everything that you practice will connect to that target until it becomes part of your playing, So until that one thing that you targeted begins to appear in your playing naturally, you just want to focus on that thing. And that thing, sometimes it could be a technical target, So like maybe getting those rootless voicings under your fingers. So maybe I'm playing 2-5-1s. And these are in different positions. So this is like a position A, C minor 7. And there's a secret there where you just move the 7th of your chord down a half step and you're already playing the 5 chord. So that's a technical thing. So if I try a different chord, I've got the voicings under my fingers because I'm thinking from a technical perspective. Sometimes it's probably a musical target. So like maybe you're trying to develop motifs instead of just running through chord changes or just running up and down scales or maybe playing licks. So suppose I'm playing Autumn Leaves, right? I might have a motive. Motive is just a musical idea. So maybe I've got so that is going to be my target, for a period of time, just learning how to take a motive and then developing it. So that's a musical idea. And sometimes it could even be an identity target, so maybe I could say to myself, I'm going to spend the entire month really just listening or absorbing this one specific player. Now, I've done that myself for several musicians, so for a period of time, the only thing I was listening to was Barry Harris. And for a certain period of time, I was only listening to Horace Silver. And then for some time, I was only listening to Red Garland, So that could be a focus. And the goal really is not just to copy these players. What you're really after is understanding what they are after, right? So what was their focus? And what did they care about? So if I enjoy listening to them, well, that might give me a clue about maybe what's important to me, So what does what they're doing spark in you, And the point of the whole thing is you're now moving with intention rather than just accumulating information. Like, okay, here's a bebop lick. Okay, here are rootless voicings. Okay, here are some fourths. Or whatever, the random information. So you're collecting things, but with intention. So you're really moving in a specific direction. So your voice, and I guess that's an important phrase right there, your voice. So your voice as a jazz pianist isn't just something that you find by learning more things. You've got to be very intentional here. So I think it's something that you actually uncover. So you've already got a voice, but you've really got to uncover by going deeper into the right things. So you've really got to go deep into the things that are really important to you. And that process really starts with a very simple question. And the question is this: what do I actually love about this music? So if you want to explore this further, I am going to be doing a free live masterclass on the 30th of April, which is International Jazz Day. Whew. So we are going to go through the 5 mistakes that keep jazz musicians stuck for years. And this right here, this whole idea of trying to do everything is one of those 5 mistakes. So I'm going to put a link to this in the description. Just know that it's completely free and I would love to see you there. If you found this video useful, then please just share it with someone else who's probably chasing every style and trying to figure out what they want to do and maybe wondering why they're not really improving, because it might be exactly what they need to hear. So if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, please support me and just click that subscribe button. Also, if you are a complete beginner to this thing called jazz, please feel free to check out my Jazz Piano Fundamentals course, which I'm going to put in the description. And if you already play, so if you're an intermediate player and you think, ooh, I know my basics, just watch this space, because again, on International Jazz Day, I'll be releasing a new course called the Jazz Piano Lab, which really goes deep, and we cover a lot of these things. So if I was speaking gibberish at some point, like maybe talking about rootless voicings, or some other things, you know, like some Bill Evans techniques or things like that, then you probably really want to check that out. It'll be coming out on the 30th of April at a very good special discounted price. So please check that out and keep practicing, and I hope to see you in the next video.